Hello, fellow classmates, Professor Smith and Dr. Roden. My name is Stephanie Stallings. I'm coming to you from Wichita, Kansas. As some of you may know or remember, I recently moved here from Temecula, California. So I don't quite have the access to technology like I had before to have the presentation behind me. So I'm going to do the best that I can with this. I am a student in the Master of Legal Studies program here at University of Oklahoma and set to graduate in May of 2020. Here's hoping. I have chosen to complete my presentation for the Tribal Courts Unit 7 final project on the Ponca Tribal District Court of Oklahoma, which is currently located in White Eagle, Oklahoma. A little background on the tribe and myself. I am an enrolled member of the Ponca Tribe of Oklahoma, as well as a descendant of the Liseño Rincon, based out of Southern California. My mother was full-blooded Ponca. Her maiden name was Betty Jo Buffalohead. Her parents were Roy and Dorothy Buffalohead, and my great-grandfather was Mark Buffalohead, a known spiritual Ponca leader, as well as a victim of the Ponca Trail of Tears, which occurred in 1877 when the tribe was relocated from our Nebraska, present-day Nebraska area to the Indian Territory. There's going to be a photo of him on slide 2. My mother grew up near White Eagle, Oklahoma in the family home, which is located now on what is known as Cowboy Hill, between Ponca City and Marland, Oklahoma. When I decided or chose to make the report on my tribal court, I knew that I was going to face some difficulty with obtaining the information I was going to need and general continuity due to a very recent overhaul of our business committee slash tribal council. The tribe recently held our election back in November, which resulted in 4 positions of the business committee changing hands. Putting this in the nicest way possible, the tides of power have recently changed, but hopefully for the good this time. It was a matter of the same people have been in for years and years, and change is not happening. Things are not getting taken care of, and we've got some issues. As a result of this election, our health clinic, the tribal court, the Indian Child Welfare Office, tribal police, payroll department, senior citizen program, our environmental department, just to name a few, have all have either new directors, new personnel. They're being revamped. There's a lot of moving pieces going on right now. As several of our professors have discussed in this program, if you've been in this program with me, we know that these upheavals and changes in power are typical, and that these type of alterations are drastic but not uncommon. My tribe is none too familiar with this. This is not the first time this has happened. The problem is when this happens, the wrong people get back in. It's about numbers and power of families. That's kind of what happens. This has probably happened about two or three times in my adulthood. It also happened when I was in high school. My mom and my family lost their jobs in the late 90s because of changing of powers. So again, this is not new for us. Our tribe has lost our casino over the last several years due to mismanagement of funds. Our police force was taken over by the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and just before this new council took over, the tribe was on the verge of being shut down by the Department of the Interior for either mishandling of funding or proper reporting mismanagement. There's been no reports to our higher powers. Essentially, the tribe has not been doing what's requested of them. So that just gives you a little bit of a history and idea of where I'm coming from and the situation that my tribe is in. It did make it a little difficult to get some of the information that I needed, but I did the best that I can, and we'll kind of go from here on out with that. So if you're following along with me on the slide, the presentation that I presented for the PowerPoint, slide 2 is going to start off with a little history of the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma. The photo provided is my grandpa, as I mentioned. His name is Mark Buffalo. He lived to be almost 106 years old. Like I mentioned, he was a participant, or not wanting to be a participant, but he was a participant in the Ponca Trail of Tears. He did die in 1963, I believe. He is a known spiritual man that's very aware. But A little history on the tribe. The Ponca tribe is currently located in Kay County, Oklahoma, just south of Ponca City in what is known as White Eagle. That's the tribal jurisdictional land. There is a northern band of Ponca Indians. They are the northern Poncas, sometimes referred to as the cold Poncas because of the fact that they are our original our original descendants. Essentially, when the Trail of Tears split and some went down who were forced in Indian Territory stayed, but there are some that managed to still stay up there. We are not technically truly associated with each other, but we are. I mean, we're all Poncas, but there is a little bit of a distinction between the two. Currently, the tribe has an enrollment of approximately about 3,800. If you'll look to slide 3, there's going to be a picture of a Chief White Eagle. This photo was taken in 1890. He was a known Ponca chief, and he was chief for almost 50 years with us. So getting into a little bit of the history. The tribal history states that the Higa tribes divided up when they came from the Mississippi River during an ancient migration. There were several divisions. We are essentially, it's going to get to it, but we are a break off of the Sioux essentially. So where some after this division, some continued down to what is now Arkansas. Some continued to follow the river, which led up to the Osage River in what is now present-day Missouri. Some ascended to the Omahas, so the state of Nebraska, essentially, while the Poncas continued on further down the Missouri River and ended up by the Niobrara River. There were several recorded Ponca villages that dating back from in the history to 1673 is the earliest recording of them. And the Poncas can be recorded throughout that north central Midwest area, essentially, all the way from what is now present-day Minnesota to the Black Hills of South Dakota. That's how far out we stretched and kind of fell and where the tribe moved, essentially. So as I stated, we ended up in White Eagle, Oklahoma after the Indian Territory and after the Trail of Tears. So let's get a little bit into that. So slide 4 is going to provide you with some information on the treaties that the Poncas signed. The Poncas were a small tribe that never really reached numbers above 800 members in early recordings. The treaties between the United States and the Poncas start out friendly enough. The first one was essentially a treaty of friendship is what it was called, and that was signed in 1817 as a treaty of friendship. Then there was a trade and commercial regulation treaty that was signed in 1825. However, the most influential and destructive treaty, of course, that was signed by the Poncas would be the 1858 treaty. There is a link in the slideshow that leads you to some information on this treaty. As well as in the reference, there is a link to the book that I found, an actual a printed copy of the treaty between the Poncas and the United States. But essentially, that treaty was the treaty that, decided the Poncas needed to give up the land that was in Nebraska that they were eventually going to need to move, end up in Indian Territory. But that's the one that they signed that really, truly, gave up the land that they had and started the change of our tribe, essentially. However, what was even more devastating, as a lot of us, I think, have learned, was the signing of the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868. What had happened with the Poncas with that treaty, even though that treaty had to do with the Sioux, almost 96,000 acres were taken from the Poncas and given to the Sioux. So that really ended up solidifying the Poncas losing what they had in Nebraska, essentially. As a result, the removal process began sometime in 1877 and culminated in the winter of 1879, where, of course, multiple losses of life were reported, and ultimately leading the Poncas to what is now present-day White Eagle, Oklahoma. another little side note, and I know that we've discussed this before. That link on the treaty page has a link to the Avalon site. It's actually the trial of Standing Bear. Standing Bear, as some of you guys may remember, was a chief whose son had died on the Trail of Tears down to the Indian Territory. He was a Ponca chief, so he's one of our known Ponca leaders from back in the day, and he fought to go back to that Nebraska homestead that they had. So that's where that treaty comes into play. So that's where some of that information comes from. I digress a little bit. That's a whole nother. There's a lot of information and history on that. There's a lot of books on Chief Standing Bear, but that kind of gives you a little more detail on some of the suffering that the Poncas went through, and he's a known leader that we have a history on because of that. So, present day Ponca tribe of Oklahoma. So slide 5, which I provided for you guys, is going to actually give us a link to our Ponca tribal constitution. So the Constitution was written and eventually adopted in September of 1950 under the Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act, which, as we know, is an extension of the Wheeler-Howard Act, or the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. Under the Ponca tribe of Indians of Oklahoma's Constitution, there are several important details that are listed. My tribe's membership rules, the governing body, the election rules, vacancy rules, and removal of office rules are all written into it, as well as the Bill of Rights, jurisdiction, and powers of the business committee, duties of their descriptions of their office duties, as well as other items are listed. However, there is no mention of the tribal court in our Constitution. I'll get into that a little bit later because, again, the Constitution was signed in 1950, and as some of you may have learned with some of your research, a lot of these courts didn't come into play till about 2 decades later. So we'll get into that in just a moment about how long it took until the Ponca tribes did get a tribal court, and that's why there is no mention in the Constitution. So, a little side note, the current elected business committee has noted that a revamp of our Constitution is underway, as it's highly due for an update. It's 70 years old. There are 2 major areas of hope set for change. There are talks of opening the tribe's election of the business committee members to reflect the specific titles or the specific openings. Right now what happens is that however many positions are open, like I mentioned, there was 4 in this last election. Once those 7 positions are filled, it could be 1 or 2 or 3, however many years need to, with each election year, how many need to be filled. But the total is 7 business committee members. Once those business committee members are elected, they create a quorum. The quorum is 4 for our tribe, and whoever out of those 4, out of the 7, the 4 in the quorum decide where every position is. So they within themselves elect our council, meaning chairman, vice chairman, secretary, member 1, 2, whatever our tribe decides to have. The new hope is to hold an election for each position as it opens up, allowing the tribal members to vote on the specific positions instead of the council just doing that. Again, this is probably why we have some of the problems that we currently have, because once that quorum's created, if that power's in there for the wrong reasons, we have the problems that my tribe currently has right now. The other major change to the Constitution that is being considered is a change of the governmental authority that is currently held by the Business Committee. As of right now, they are the sole authority for our tribe of our legislative, judicial, and executive power. The hope is to separate those and have different entities controlling that, and not just be under the Business Committee, because, again, trying to fix some of the problems we have here. So, that leads me to the Ponca Tribal Court. On slide 6, you guys are going to see a map of the tribal jurisdiction of Oklahoma. The Ponca tribal jurisdiction is located in red on the map. The Ponca Tribal District Court does lie within the boundaries of the Ponca Tribal Jurisdiction. The Ponca Tribal District Court is a CFR court, or as we know, it's a Code of Federal Regulation court, also known as a Court of Indian Offenses. The Ponca Tribal Court falls under the Oklahoma Southern Plains Regional Office District and is among other several tribes which are listed on that, which are presented on that list. Slide 7 gives you guys a quick map of the Ponca tribal jurisdiction. If you can, when you're looking at the map, there's a small little green section highlighting the White Eagle area where the tribal court is located. So that's also in there. As I mentioned a little bit ago, the Ponca Tribal Court was established sometime in the 1970s. I was not able to get a confirmation on this date due to, again, the misplacement of a lot of tribal court information. The little information I could get out of the court clerk and what I got from the site and from some of the history stuff in the 1970s. And again, we are a CFR card that's from the Department of the Interior site that I was able to get some of the info, but that's kind of the culmination of when the court started. So slide 8 is going to provide you with some of the information, the current information, or the current judicial staff of the Ponca Tribal Court. Our current district court judge is Miss Lisa Odabobi Herbert, and her photo is provided. Our current prosecutor is Farah Terrell. Our public defender is Mr. W. Lee Stout. He has been our prosecutor for quite a while. My sister used to work for the tribal court, the Ponca Tribal Court, for almost like 10 years back in the 90s to the mid 2000s, and Lee Stout was the prosecutor then when I was still a teenager. Our guardian ad litem is Trisha Archer, and the court clerk is currently Donina Rush. The Ponca Tribal District Court has the following docket. They do provide, and this is also beginning to be found on slide 9. Slide 9. The Tribal District Court includes the following docket, which is a criminal, civil, and juvenile child support court. The District Court of the Ponca Tribe holds court sessions 3 times a month or as scheduled by the presiding District Court judge. This court hears criminal, civil, and juvenile child support cases respectively on their scheduled docket. Docket information for the court hearings are currently placed and can be found throughout the Ponca Tribal Complex, so within White Eagle, in all our tribal court buildings, and of course the lobby of the courthouse, or you can contact the tribe directly via phone number, which is listed at the beginning of the slide. Slide 9, as I stated, starts with a little bit of information on the docket. The docket that the court holds. The docket of the tribal court includes a criminal, civil, and juvenile docket, as well as the child support docket. The Ponca Tribal Court is only allowed to hear civil and criminal cases that reside within the jurisdictional boundaries of the Ponca tribe. With regards to our police force, this is also found on slide 9. As I mentioned, we don't have a Ponca police force anymore. We are currently ran by the BIA. That got taken over. I couldn't get the details on this either, but the BIA took over the police force because there was from what I had heard, there was mismanagement and funding and just laws were being broken. So the BIA took over our police department quite a while ago. As I'm sure you noticed, there's a pattern here apparently. However, with this recent election, changes that are happening, a new police supervisor has been hired. So I think the goal is starting to be to make some good changes and get back some of those privileges that we've essentially lost. All major and federal crimes are handled, from my understanding, by the CFR court in Anadarko. Essentially, it's the district, because we are part of the Oklahoma, the Ponca Tribal Court falls under the Southern Plains Regional Office. That is the entity that we're under, and as I mentioned, we're with a few other courts that are listed there. So that is that's who we fall under. So that leads me to kind of the end of the information that I was able to gather on the tribal courts. We are not a tribe that has, we don't have any, we never had a traditional court. I did find that out. We have always been a westernized version of approach to our court. Although there are some talks that maybe certain circumstances or punishment may be more traditional with this change. That's something that they're trying to get in contact with, and me being able to find the information I'm looking for. I knew it was going to be difficult. I just didn't. I don't think I was hoping I was going to have a little bit more luck, but I really didn't. And the sad thing is that it wasn't surprising, and that's just kind of where my tribe is at. I don't know how else to describe it, but let me finish a little bit more. So slide 10 brings me to um the talk about sovereignty. So the last slide, you'll actually find a really nice picture of my Uncle Dwight Buffalo Head. And he's probably in his early 30s, maybe late 20s. I interviewed my Uncle Dwight because he has been on tribal council. He's currently a consultant for the road committee. He knows a lot about our tribe and the issues. He was our tribal chairman, I think, even. And I asked him what tribal sovereignty meant to him, and he said sovereignty means something we decide for ourselves. And that really struck me. In all the classes that we've been taking and all the definitions of sovereignty and how we think of it, that was like the most clear-cut definition of what it is. And that's probably a perfect example of what I think, I guess, of how I think of it. I would never have been able to say it that simply, but I that's what I think sovereignty is. I think it's the ability of tribes to keep their sovereignty and to be, independent. And my tribe is currently not doing that. We've had so many losses. Like I mentioned, the casino's gone. We've lost our police department. We were on the verge of essentially being shut down. I honestly don't even understand. I didn't even know it was possible that a tribe could be shut down, but apparently it can. Now I take that back. Actually, now we've learned about how that happens, how that can be taken over. But that, that's what sovereignty is. I think the fact that self-governing and the ability to do so and not letting your own people drag you down, I think that's what sovereignty is. And I really think that this younger generation is attempting to do that. And I really hope that some changes do come about with the current council. And, we have our own court, and we are, as much as we can, we are functioning with some of the entities that we have. But if we don't, as a tribe, get that under control, I think we're going to lose all our power that we do have. So, my hope is that with my education here and with this younger generation, I guess I still consider myself a young buck, but I'm going to be 40 in like 2.5 years. But, there's this younger generation, my mom's generation is gone and going. And so we've got to be the ones to start taking control and start, making changes for the tribe for the better, because whatever they were doing before hasn't been working. The fact that the tribes around us are surviving and surpassing us. The Oto-Missouris are a local tribe that are very close to us. A lot of Ponkas and Otos a lot of people's families are Ponkas and Otos, like they've married Ponkas and Otos, and the Otos have they're Oto-Missouri. The Oto-Missouris have 5 casinos, and they have a credit union. They have a restaurant, several restaurants. They have a cattle ranch. That they are prospering, and they are using their sovereignty the way that it needs to be. But that's just not what my tribe is doing, and my hope is to help change that. And I'm hoping that this education and understanding the rules and the laws, and when those rules and laws are violated, that's what I'm here to hope change. So I hope you guys got the information on the court that you needed. I look forward to hearing and seeing everyone else's presentations. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment in our replies. Thank you guys. Have a great evening.